Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, The Intimacy Lab. Let me ask you a quiet, unsettling question tonight. Have you ever looked at the woman beside you and wondered, is she really here with me, or is she somewhere else entirely? You see, in the intimacy of marriage, we often assume closeness equals honesty, but love is far more mysterious than we allow ourselves to admit. What if I told you that some women wives can quietly build a second life right under the gaze of their husbands without ever being caught? And what if their secrets aren't kept with lies alone, but with subtle psychological tricks so disarming, so emotionally clever, that even the most attentive partner might miss them? You might think you would know. You might think you could feel it if she were hiding something as deep as betrayal. But these deceptions, they don't look like deceptions, they look like over-affection, they look like distance disguised as tiredness. They look like explanations you almost want to believe. Tonight, we are going to step gently but bravely into this complicated terrain, where loyalty and deception sometimes sleep in the same bed. In this video, we'll explore the 7 psychological tricks wives use to hide infidelity, not so you can live in suspicion, but so you can reclaim clarity, confidence, and intimacy even in the face of what you might least expect. When we think about marriage, we often think about trust as its very foundation, a trust so deeply woven into the fabric of daily life that we rarely question it until something feels off. And often, when betrayal happens, it doesn't announce itself loudly. No, it whispers in the quiet spaces. It disguises itself in habits, in explanations, in subtle shifts that seem innocuous but are anything but. So tonight, I want to speak to the men who sense that something has changed but can't quite put their finger on it. Maybe it's a flicker in her eyes when she looks away too fast. Maybe it's the warmth that's gone cold even though she's still saying all the right things. You are not imagining it, and you deserve to understand the psychology that sometimes hides beneath these changes. The first trick, and perhaps one of the most disarming, is what I would call excessive affection. It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? We are conditioned to believe that distance is a sign of infidelity. But here's the nuance: when a wife is hiding betrayal, sometimes she will overcompensate. She may suddenly become warmer, more attentive, unusually generous with compliments or small gestures. The hugs are longer, the kisses are softer, the "I love yous" seem almost too perfectly timed. Why? Because guilt is a powerful driver of behavior. That guilt often compels a partner to lean in, to try to make up for her secret with affection that feels genuine, but is motivated by an undercurrent of anxiety. You might find yourself thinking, she's finally really present with me. But in truth, this could be her way of soothing not just you, but herself. This excessive affection isn't sustainable, of course, and over time, it will feel just a little too polished, a little too deliberate. Now what follows next is perhaps even more confusing because it happens in the very same relationship, emotional distance disguised as stress. This is the second trick wives may unconsciously or consciously use. Suddenly she's tired all the time. She's overwhelmed with work. She needs more space. She retreats under the weight of responsibilities. The emotional availability that was once there feels thinner. She might tell you, it's just a busy season, or I just need time for myself right now. On the surface, this makes perfect sense. After all, who isn't stressed, who doesn't need a break, but look closely and listen carefully? If this distance appears selective, if she's withdrawn from you while showing energy elsewhere, then this stress may be something else entirely. This withdrawal is an elegant psychological maneuver. It makes her absence seem justified while protecting her secret. It gives her plausible deniability, and it can leave you feeling guilty for even questioning it. What makes this so hard to detect is that it's layered with believable excuses. We want to support our partners when they say they're exhausted. We want to give them the space they ask for. But that space can sometimes be a cover, a subtle but powerful distancing strategy that creates room for someone else, while you are kept just far enough away not to notice. And then comes over-explaining daily routines. This is a fascinating psychological trick because it appeals to your desire for transparency. Suddenly, she's giving you detailed accounts of where she's been, who she's met, and what she's done. You may think, why would she tell me all this if she were hiding something? But that is exactly why it works. These excessive explanations are meant to create an illusion of openness. She might volunteer information you didn't even ask for, rehearsing stories that sound so complete you feel guilty for doubting her. Every appointment, every lunch, every errand suddenly comes with a narrative. And yet, if you listen closely, these stories are often too precise, too rehearsed, lacking the natural imperfections of real recollections. You see, deception thrives not just in what is hidden, but also in what is offered too perfectly. When someone is genuinely sharing, there are usually gaps, little moments of forgetfulness or emotional texture. But when someone is performing transparency, the story can feel polished, even rigid. This oversharing is not generosity, it's a psychological trick designed to preempt suspicion, to feed you just enough detail to keep you comfortable, while distracting you from what's really going on. And that's the thing about these tricks. They don't scream betrayal. They feel like ordinary moments in a marriage. Warmth, exhaustion, openness, none of these are inherently suspicious, which is why they work so well as covers. So as we begin this exploration together, I want you to listen to this not from a place of fear, but from a place of curiosity and emotional clarity. If you feel that something is wrong in your relationship, it's important to understand that what you're noticing may not be irrational paranoia. Sometimes your body and your intuition can pick up on changes that your conscious mind hasn't yet named. This conversation is not about blame. It's about awareness, about recognizing how emotional dynamics can shift in ways that confuse you and make you doubt yourself. It's about reclaiming your ability to read between the lines, to trust your own perceptions even when they seem at odds with what's being presented to you. So we've talked about excessive affection as a way to soothe guilt, emotional distance disguised as stress, to justify withdrawal, and over-explaining daily routines to create an illusion of honesty. Each of these behaviors can seem like normal ups and downs in a relationship, but together they can indicate a more complicated reality. You know, one of the most striking things about these psychological maneuvers is how they don't announce themselves as deception. They hide in plain sight, dressed in everyday behaviors that, at first glance, appear utterly reasonable, and as we continue this exploration together, I want you to stay attuned, not suspicious, but perceptive. Your perception is a precious resource in intimacy, and it deserves to be honored. So let's move gently now into another subtle but potent psychological trick, creating selective conflict. You may notice that your wife has suddenly become more reactive, more argumentative, especially over minor, inconsequential things. It's as if small issues that never mattered before are now worthy of tension, irritation, even anger. You might ask yourself, why is she fighting with me about this? What changed? This is not random. Conflict in this context serves a purpose. It creates emotional distance, making it easier for her to justify the withdrawal she's already orchestrating. If she can convince herself and you that you are somehow the cause of this discord, then the space she needs for her secret becomes not only available but also rationalized. You may find that these conflicts leave you feeling confused or guilty, perhaps even responsible for her unhappiness. But look deeper. Ask yourself if these arguments are about real issues, or if they are out of proportion, driven by a need to establish emotional separateness. Conflict can act as a psychological smoke screen. It shifts attention from what she's doing to how you're behaving. And sometimes these conflicts are followed by cold silences, withdrawal, or a need for time apart, which all serve to carve out emotional and often logistical space for deception to flourish. Closely related to this is another behavior that can feel like a natural part of modern life, but in this context serves a very different purpose: focus on self-improvement. Suddenly, she's developed new routines, new habits, and new interests that seem to exclude you. Maybe she's joined a new gym, adopted a new diet, taken up a new hobby, or enrolled in courses that she prefers to attend alone. Of course, self-improvement is healthy, it's vital even. But here's what makes this behavior worth noticing. It becomes a domain where you are no longer invited, where you are subtly pushed to the periphery. These pursuits become sacred spaces in her schedule, protected by the narrative of growth and wellness. You might feel proud at first. You might even encourage her independence, her efforts to feel stronger, healthier, or more fulfilled. But pay attention to whether these new activities are becoming arenas where you are systematically excluded. The key is not whether she has her own interests, it's whether those interests are now absorbing disproportionate time, energy, and attention, while intimacy at home quietly erodes. This trick works so well because it plays on your supportiveness. You want to respect her autonomy. You want her to feel empowered, and so you hesitate to ask questions that might feel controlling or intrusive. But in doing so, you may overlook how these new routines have also become buffers, protecting parts of her life from your gaze. And this brings us to another deeply subtle maneuver: increased digital secrecy. We live in a world where digital devices hold the entirety of our inner and outer lives, our conversations, our plans, our feelings. So it's easy to miss when small shifts in digital behavior begin to signal something more significant. You might notice that she takes her phone everywhere, even to places where she didn't before: the bathroom, the garden, late at night into bed. Maybe her notifications are suddenly hidden. Maybe she's changed her passcode or added one for the first time. Again, each of these behaviors on its own could have an innocent explanation. She might value her privacy. She might be reading or watching something sensitive or personal, but look for patterns, look for subtle evasiveness. When you enter the room, does she quickly change screens? When her phone rings, does she hesitate before answering, or reject calls more often than she accepts them? This is not about policing her digital life. It's about recognizing when privacy shifts into secrecy. There's a difference. Privacy respects boundaries, secrecy manipulates them. When digital behaviors start to feel curated, when what you can see seems carefully selected, while entire areas of her online interactions are concealed, this may be another trick designed to manage your perceptions while keeping you at a distance from what she's really doing. Increased digital secrecy is particularly effective because it fits perfectly into the narrative of modern independence. We all want to believe that everyone is entitled to digital autonomy. But when this autonomy suddenly becomes shrouded in avoidance, hidden notifications, new apps, or unexplained changes in communication patterns, it's worth paying attention, not out of paranoia, but out of self-respect. And that's where I want to pause for a moment, not to conclude this conversation, but to honor the emotional complexity of what we're talking about. Because here's the truth: no one wants to find themselves in a relationship where trust has eroded. The thought that your partner might be hiding something so intimate, so consequential, is painful. But knowing the signs, understanding the psychology, is not about becoming suspicious of every behavior. It's about reclaiming your ability to see clearly. So far, we've explored creating selective conflict, where arguments are used to justify emotional distance, focus on self-improvement, where new interests become walls instead of bridges, and increased digital secrecy, where her online world becomes curated in ways that shut you out. These tricks work because they borrow from behaviors that are normal, even healthy. Conflict happens in all relationships. Personal growth is vital for everyone. And yes, privacy matters, even between spouses. But these tricks take ordinary behaviors and stretch them, subtly turning them into shields that protect not intimacy, but secrecy. What I want you to understand is this. When a partner hides betrayal, it rarely looks like the caricature of cheating we see in movies or hear about in gossip. It's not always dramatic, more often it's quiet. It's camouflaged in kindness, explained away by stress, justified by self-care, or hidden in arguments that leave you questioning yourself instead of questioning her behavior. And so, this journey is not about turning you into a suspicious detective. It's about honoring the intelligence of your own feelings. If you felt that your connection has changed, if you sense that the warmth between you has turned cool in ways that can't be explained by normal life stresses, then these insights may help you articulate what your intuition already knows. And as we sit with this conversation together, I want to remind you, these shifts we're exploring aren't always signs of betrayal. They're signs of change. And the key is in your ability to sense when that change no longer feels mutual, when it no longer nurtures closeness, but begins to cultivate distance under a veil of ordinary life. So let's continue. Another subtle yet devastating psychological maneuver is strategic vulnerability. Imagine this. She suddenly opens up about past traumas or difficult emotions in ways that are unusually deep, perhaps even new to your relationship dynamic. At first, this feels like a reconnection. After all, intimacy thrives on vulnerability. You may think, she's finally letting me into places she's kept hidden. But here's the paradox. This vulnerability may not actually be about fostering closeness. It can serve to distract, disarm, and even silence your intuition. When she shares pain or emotional hardship, she immediately becomes harder to confront. It's as though her disclosure shields her from your suspicion. This psychological trick works because as partners, we are naturally empathetic. When someone we love is hurting, we lean in, we soften, and we often suspend judgment. But sometimes this can be exploited when her sudden vulnerability is not about true intimacy, but about preemptively protecting her secret by positioning herself as emotionally fragile, thus discouraging you from questioning other behaviors. You may notice that this newfound openness is selective. It doesn't deepen your overall connection. Instead, it seems to appear just when questions or doubts might otherwise rise in you. You feel compassion, but you also feel confused, and that's exactly how this maneuver works. It keeps you emotionally occupied, drawing your attention away from the subtle inconsistencies that might otherwise invite inquiry. Then there's delegation of intimacy to technology. What does that look like? It's when she starts sending more affectionate texts, sweet messages, even flirtatious emojis. But these gestures replace rather than reinforce in-person closeness. She might initiate playful or loving conversations while at work or when you're apart, creating a sense of intimacy at a distance. At first, this seems beautiful. After all, isn't digital affection part of modern love? But here's the nuance. When this digital affection becomes a substitute for actual emotional presence at home, when the warm messages during the day don't translate into warmth at night, then it may serve as a psychological bomb, a clever way of sustaining the illusion of connection while keeping the reality of distance intact. This trick is effective because it taps into the modern expectation of always being connected. Those smiley faces, sweet texts, and playful remarks during the day soothe you. They make you feel that everything is okay. But if the texture of your real-time interaction starts feeling flat, thin, or cool despite all those sweet digital touches, then you're receiving affection without presence, comfort without intimacy, it's important to recognize this distinction. Digital gestures are beautiful supplements to intimacy, but they are never a replacement for its embodied presence. If warmth is only arriving through your screen, while your home feels increasingly cold, that's a signal worth noticing. And layered into this often comes mirroring your moods to deflect suspicion. This maneuver is almost invisible because it feels like harmony. Suddenly, she's emotionally synced with you in a way that seems ideal. If you're tired, she's tired. If you're stressed, she's stressed. If you're in a good mood, she reflects that back to you effortlessly. This psychological trick works by lowering your guard. When someone mirrors your moods perfectly, you feel validated, seen, understood. But there's a shadow side to this harmony. It can mask a lack of true engagement. Mirroring becomes a performance, a careful calibration that keeps everything feeling balanced on the surface, while underneath a deeper disconnection is growing. True intimacy is not about perfect synchronization. It's about authentic interaction, even when there are differences in mood, energy, or perspective. When a partner mirrors too perfectly, too consistently, especially during a time when other forms of connection are declining, it may not be empathy, it may be a subtle way of ensuring that you never look too closely. It's as if her emotional landscape becomes a reflection of yours, not because she's truly sharing space with you, but because this mirroring keeps you comfortable and distracted from noticing other shifts in all these behaviors. What we see is not overt deceit, but emotional choreography. Each maneuver is designed not just to hide an affair, but to maintain your perception of closeness, of normalcy, of connection, even when that connection is quietly eroding. And I know this is difficult terrain to walk through. It's painful to think that someone you love might engage in this kind of choreography to manage your perceptions. But this conversation is not about blame. It's about reclaiming clarity. When you notice these patterns, strategic vulnerability, delegation of intimacy to technology, and mirroring your moods to deflect suspicion, what you're really noticing is a shift in emotional authenticity. These are not always conscious decisions on her part. Often, they're driven by guilt, anxiety, or an unconscious desire to manage competing realities. But your role here isn't to diagnose or accuse, it's to honor your own experience, your own perception. Because when something feels wrong, when the warmth in your home feels thinner, when connection feels curated rather than lived, you are being invited to pay attention. That's what intimacy asks of us, not blind trust, not suspicion, but attention. The willingness to see what is, even when it's uncomfortable. The courage to hold both love and truth in the same breath. And as we continue this tender conversation together, I want you to hold on to this truth. Suspicion alone doesn't mean there's betrayal. These signs we're exploring are simply invitations for you to become aware, awake to dynamics that may have become invisible through routine, through love, through the comfort of assuming everything is as it seems. Sometimes the most skillful psychological tricks are those that feel the most normal, even caring. One of the most difficult to recognize is what I call the gift of excessive freedom. Suddenly, she seems completely unconcerned about your whereabouts, your plans, your social life. At first, this feels like trust. It feels like she's honoring your independence, encouraging you to go out, meet friends, take trips, spend weekends however you like. You may even think, wow, she really supports me. She's giving me so much space. But pay attention, this excessive freedom might not simply be generosity. It may be a clever psychological trick designed to ensure that you aren't looking too closely at her own patterns. By actively encouraging your independence, she creates a dynamic where you are far less likely to question her own autonomy. It can feel liberating, even seductive, especially for men who value freedom and dislike controlling partners. But behind this freedom there can be an unspoken contract. I won't question you, so please don't question me, and it's subtle. You might feel gratitude for this relaxed atmosphere, and that gratitude itself can blind you to the reality that this distance is being mutually negotiated, not with words, but with behavior. This trick works beautifully because it taps into your desire to be respected, to feel trusted, to be treated as an independent adult. But when freedom is offered not as an act of love, but as a strategy of concealment, it becomes a mask, one that hides not trust, but secrets. Hand in hand with this is another deeply human tendency, reframing absence as self-care. Imagine that she's suddenly spending a lot of time alone or away, explaining her absences as necessary for her mental health, her wellness, her peace of mind. She might go on solo retreats, spend evenings out just needing a break, or disappear into new groups or communities where you are gently but firmly excluded. Again, this sounds reasonable. After all, don't we all need space sometimes? Don't we want our partners to take care of themselves? But notice whether this self-care feels like connection or like disconnection. Healthy self-care nurtures not just the self, but the relationship. It replenishes energy that returns to the partnership. When her self-care consistently leads to more emotional distance, less shared time, fewer shared experiences, then something else may be happening. The key here is not to become suspicious of every absence or every wellness activity, but to observe whether these activities seem to drain her emotional availability rather than restore it. When her self-care becomes a realm where you no longer exist, when it becomes a fortress rather than a garden, it may not be about nurturing herself. It may be about protecting a part of her life she no longer wishes to share with you, and all of this brings us to something even more delicate, redirecting questions back onto you. This is perhaps one of the most disorienting psychological maneuvers of all. You ask a simple question, a perfectly reasonable one: where were you? Who did you have lunch with? Why didn't you answer your phone yesterday evening? And instead of receiving an answer, you find yourself on the defensive. Suddenly the conversation isn't about her absence. It's about your tone, your insecurities, your supposed controlling behavior. She might say, "Why are you always suspicious?" Or, "Can't I have some space without being interrogated?" This redirection is masterful because it reframes your inquiry as an attack, turning the emotional tables and leaving you doubting yourself rather than her. You begin to hesitate before asking even the simplest questions, because now those questions seem like evidence of your own insecurity or possessiveness. Over time, this maneuver can slowly erode your confidence in your own perceptions. It makes you second guess your instincts, your observations, even your memories. This trick thrives in relationships where open communication is valued because it weaponizes that openness against you. Instead of feeling heard, you feel judged. Instead of gaining clarity, you're left in confusion and guilt. But here's what I want you to hear most clearly. Your curiosity, your questions, your desire for clarity are not flaws. They are expressions of your commitment to the relationship. They are signs that you care enough to stay connected, that you wish to share a mutual truth, not a curated illusion. When a partner redirects legitimate questions back onto you, when she uses your curiosity as evidence of your faults, she's not protecting her freedom, she's protecting her secret. All these psychological tricks, the gift of excessive freedom, reframing absence as self-care, and redirecting questions back onto you, operate not through aggression, but through subtle shifts that seem almost generous, almost caring. And that's why they are so effective. These maneuvers rely on your goodwill, your empathy, your desire to be a supportive, loving partner. They exploit your best qualities, not your weaknesses, and that's what makes them so hard to see. But as we continue this conversation, remember, noticing these patterns doesn't mean immediately accusing your partner. It means becoming more attuned to the emotional fabric of your relationship. It means honoring what you feel, what you sense, even when what you're being told doesn't quite match what you're experiencing. And here we are, you and I, having walked together through this delicate, sometimes painful conversation. A conversation not just about infidelity, but about human behavior, about the ways we protect ourselves, justify our actions, and sometimes even deceive the ones we love. What I want to leave you with now is this: these 7 psychological tricks we've explored: excessive affection, emotional distance disguised as stress, over-explaining daily routines, creating selective conflict, focus on self-improvement, increased digital secrecy, strategic vulnerability, delegation of intimacy to technology, mirroring your moods to deflect suspicion, the gift of excessive freedom, reframing absence as self-care, and redirecting questions back onto you, all share one thing: they borrow from behaviors that, in healthy relationships, are entirely normal. That's what makes them so difficult to detect. None of these behaviors in isolation automatically means betrayal. Sometimes a partner really is just stressed. Sometimes self-improvement is simply self-love. Sometimes we all need a little distance, privacy, or digital space. But when these behaviors begin to accumulate, when they feel patterned, rehearsed, or oddly polished, when warmth feels performative rather than authentic, when distance feels like disconnection rather than healthy autonomy, this is when your intuition stirs, and this is what I want to honor in you, that quiet voice inside you that sometimes whispers something doesn't feel right. That whisper is not paranoia, it's the sensitivity that healthy relationships are built upon. You are not meant to ignore that whisper. You are meant to listen, not with suspicion, not with accusation, but with clarity, curiosity, and courage. It's important to say this too: infidelity is complex. It's never just about sex or attraction. Often it's about loneliness, unspoken disappointments, buried longings, or the desire for renewal. Sometimes it's a symptom of something broken in the relationship, and sometimes it's about something broken inside the betraying partner themselves. That's why I invite you not to leap to conclusions, but to pay attention, to step back, to reflect, to notice patterns without judgment. If you recognize several of these psychological tricks showing up at once, that may be an invitation to gently confront the reality of what's happening in your relationship, not from a place of rage or blame, but from a place of self-respect and emotional clarity. And here's something else I want to say directly to you, especially if this conversation has felt uncomfortably close to your own experience. You deserve honesty. You deserve to feel that the affection you receive is rooted in truth. You deserve transparency that doesn't feel curated or rehearsed. You deserve a connection that feels mutual, alive, and real, not one that makes you feel as though you are constantly questioning your instincts. Love is not about control, but neither is it about manipulation. Intimacy is not about surveillance, but neither is it about deception. True intimacy requires 2 people willing to show up fully, honestly, imperfectly, but authentically. So if you find yourself in a relationship where these signs are accumulating, I want you to take a deep breath and remember that your next step is not to react, but to reflect. Gather your thoughts, notice what feels true, then, when you are ready, create a space for conversation, not interrogation, but conversation. Ask with curiosity rather than accusation. Speak from your feelings rather than your fears. Say things like, "I feel a distance between us that I can't explain," or "I sense that your attention is elsewhere, and I miss the connection we used to have." You will learn a lot by how your partner responds, not just what she says, but how she listens, how she receives your feelings, whether she deflects, redirects, or meets you with openness. And I want to remind you too, whatever you discover, your worth remains intact. Betrayal, if it exists, says more about where she is than about your value as a man, as a partner, as a person. Some couples navigate infidelity and come out stronger on the other side because they are willing to face the truth together, to work through the pain, to rebuild trust. Others choose to part ways, not because they failed, but because the relationship has reached its natural conclusion. Either way, what matters most is that you remain anchored in your dignity, your self-awareness, your capacity for love and truth. So as we close this conversation today, I want you to hold on to this. Your intuition is a sacred instrument. The questions you ask yourself about your relationship are not evidence of paranoia. They are signs of care. The willingness to notice, to listen, to speak, to reflect. That is what keeps intimacy alive, even in its most difficult moments. If this conversation has resonated with you, if you've recognized patterns in your relationship or simply felt validated in feelings you couldn't name before, I encourage you to honor that by acting gently but decisively. Don't rush to judgment, but don't bury your instincts either. Don't accuse, but don't silence yourself. Don't lose yourself in suspicion, but don't abandon your truth. And as always, I want this space, the Intimacy Lab, to be a place where we can have these difficult but vital conversations together. So please, share your thoughts, your experiences, your questions in the comments below. Your voice matters here. If you found this video helpful or healing, please like it. It helps this message reach more people who may need it. Subscribe if you haven't yet, so we can continue having these thoughtful, intimate conversations together. And as you step back into your life after watching this, I want to leave you with this reminder. The deepest gift you can give yourself, and any relationship you're in, is presence. True presence. The courage to see, to listen, to speak, and to love, all at the same time. Here's to living with clarity, courage, and compassion, even when the road feels uncertain. Thank you for spending this time with me. I see you, I honor you, and I look forward to meeting you again, right here next time